of the internet. Yes, ladies and gentlemen, I have come once again. Once again, I have come to bring you the news of the day. All right, as I am interested in. I'm not saying I'm perfect. I'm not saying this is news that'll interest everybody. All right, but it's news that will interest me, or it gives me, a little bit of a picture of what's going on. All right, as we go through today to see what's happening. All right, if there's anything breaking, if there's anything outstanding, if there's anything really new, you know, uh, those are what I'm looking for, and we will see how it all plays out. I hope that you're all having a good day on this Thursday. But let's go ahead and get started, shall we? Right here, Iran. Nationwide protests appear increasingly smothered after crackdown and internet outage. The nationwide protests challenging Iran's theocracy appeared increasingly smothered Thursday, a week after authorities shut off the countries from the world and escalated a bloody crackdown that activists say has killed at least 2,637 people. The prospect of U.S. retaliation for the deaths of the protesters still hung over the region, though President Donald Trump signaled a possible de-escalation, saying the killing appeared to be ending. The U.S. announced new sanctions on Iranian officials accused of suppressing protests, which began last month over the country's faltering economy and collapse of its currency. In the Iranian capital, Tehran, witnesses said recent mornings showed no new signs of bonfires lit the night before or debris in the streets. The sound of gunfire, which had been intense for several nights, has also faded. Meanwhile, Iranian state media has announced wave after wave of arrests by authorities targeting those it calls terrorists, while also apparently looking for Starlink satellite internet dishes, which offer the only way to get videos and images out to the internet. Okay, this is what I was trying to tell people. And it's unfortunate that Trump had to open his mouth to encourage the protesters to continue to riot and so forth, saying that they were going to get U.S. support when we were in no position to give them that support. Sure, we could have bombed a few buildings, but what good would it have done? How would it have affected things? I said this before. If we were going to go in there and help the situation, and to be honest, I'm not saying that would have been a bad thing or so forth. But you need to have the assets in the area to do it. You need to have the willpower to do it. And with all due respect to Trump, he doesn't have that. Not right now. We have too many irons in the fire right now to help with the Iranians. If we were serious about doing things about the Iranians, we should have done something about their entire ability to do anything. What are you saying there, Nomad? I'm saying you blockade the entire nation. You declare a blockade, and no ships go to Iran, no ships leave Iran, all right, because Iran doesn't have any ships. And when you find someone building a ship or a ship out there, you put it to the bottom of the ocean. If you were serious about taking care of the Iranians, if you were serious about helping the Iranian people, you first got to sit there and make it so that they have no ability to react. And a naval blockade, it's just the start. But it's got to be a real blockade. not a pretend one. And people have to understand that. You have to sit up there and put in a blockade that you're willing to say, okay, nothing leaves, nothing comes in here from the Navy. Well, but their land border is so long, no man, don't you understand? They would just get what? From who? They're gonna get food from Russia? Don't think so. You're gonna get food from the Afghanistanis? Don't think so. The Pakistanis? Don't think so. The Iraqis? The Kurds? Don't think so. You had to declare a total blockade. And we weren't in a position to do that. We could have. It's something I said we should have been doing back when. I know a lot of people don't like this, but back with good old boy George Bush, if George Bush had the balls that he needed to have, right? When we went into Iraq and we were encountering all the problems with the frickin' Iranians coming over and building frickin' bombs, killing our troops in Iraq, all right? What we should have flat out said is that next time there's a thing like that, Iran ceases to exist militarily, and we should have started bombing the Iranians. We didn't have to go in there. We would just say, look, we're not going to sit up there and go in there, but we are going to bomb every freaking military asset that we see. We should have sank everything. We should have blown out every single thing that they had that had any kind of military capability to it whatsoever, and then let them think happy thoughts about themselves. Instead, we were trying to play, but the world, and how the world, who cares how the world reacts? They're going to go boo-poo America, just like they always do, and continue on with whatever they do for themselves. I said this before, and I'll say it again. We're not in a position right now to go in there and help the Iranians the way they need to be helped, because we've had to relocate assets towards other priorities at the time. And we were not in a position to react to this to help the Iranian people. And I'm not saying that I know exactly what the help of the Iranian people is. Because the Iranians, you voted for this. You clamored for this. All these people complaining and bitching about the theocracy, okay, as to what it was going on, all right, were the same kind of group of people that were bitching about the Shah. Oh, look at us chafe under this oppression. What, you thought a theocracy was, yeah, especially a 12th century Islamic theocracy, wasn't going to be oppressive? No, you believed a bunch of leftist claptrap because the leftists were one of the groups that were being cracked down on by the Shah. But it wasn't just the leftists, of course. He was also going after these religious zealots that were constantly attacking the country. And yes, he was using absolutely horrific, brutal means. He was using means that if you looked at today would be absolutely horrific unless you study the type of actions in every Muslim country in the Middle East and a comparison study. The only reason you think it's brutal is because you're coming at it from a Western la 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 philosophy. And it was brutal. Okay? When you sit up there and ram red hot pokers up somebody's rectum, okay, that's absolute brutality for the sake of sadism. And they were doing that. They were doing that. But so was every other Muslim country, with the possible exception, and I say possible exception, all right, of the Turks. Not saying the Turk is all sweetness and light either, but the Turks are a hell of a lot better, all right, than the rest of these Islamic nations when it comes to this shit. And I'm including Egypt. I'm including Saudi Arabia. I'm including Libya, Algeria. All right, I'm including them all. If you think that somehow the Iranian mullahs were going to be somehow different than the Shah of Iran, who was engaging in this type of activity, however, you were freaking smoking crack. And if it wasn't for the duplicitous nature of the French government, this wouldn't be happening. Just pointing this out. For those who don't understand what I'm talking about, the French helped instigate the overthrow of the Shah of Iran. And they were doing it because they were mad at the U.S. So they were doing it to basically tweak the nose of the great superpower U.S. You people are bullies. You think you're the world's policeman. Well, take this. That's what they did. And if you don't believe me, just ask one simple question for yourself. If you're thinking that, oh no, the French are against this kind of stuff, all you want, okay, then explain to me why the Ayatollah Khomeini was able to run his revolution, his Islamic revolution, straight out of Paris, where he was in exile. Trump on the midterms. We shouldn't even have an election. Okay, let's read what he actually said. Okay. He calling it in an interview with Reuters, Trump expressed frustration that Republicans may lose control of the House of Representatives and possibly the Senate in November midterm elections, calling it some deep psychological thing. Trump told Reuters that when you win the presidency, you don't win the midterms. He then boasted of his accomplishments and telling a reporter, when you think of it, we shouldn't even have an election. Okay, that's a far cry from what they're trying to push here. Okay, that's a far cry from the headline where it's say where you're basically trying to say that Trump doesn't believe in elections. What Trump is saying is that if these people were sane, and they're not, you wouldn't even need an election. If everyone agreed with him, you wouldn't need an election. He's not saying I don't think there should be elections or threatening to cancel elections, which is the indications that they're trying to foist on the people. People are like this are just bad actors because they're trying to push an agenda, not tell people what the president is really thinking and how the president responds to things. And believe it or not, I'm not a Trump, all right, bootlicker. I've complained a lot about what Trump does. I just did. But the problem is that's not good enough. You either absolutely hate Trump, and if you don't absolutely hate Trump, then by that logic, You absolutely love him. There's no two ways that you can even talk about it. But the side that attacks me, the side that sits up there and says, "Oh, look at this guy, he's a bootlicker," it's not the or some other kind of like lunatic. It's not the right. It's not the people who are quote unquote MAGA. The MAGA people don't freaking. They call you a leftist because you're or a leftist loon because they can demonstrably explain exactly why they consider you a leftist loon. You guys will just sit there. Oh, you disagree with me, so therefore you're a Trump bootlicker. Anyway. Ice baby. Hateful anti-ICE agitators vandalized car in a horrifying threat. The only good agent is a dead one. A destructive anti-ICE mob scrawled threatening messages across a car in Minneapolis declaring the only good agent is a dead one as protesters turned the city into an apocalyptic scene overnight. Protesters defaced a car as angry demonstrators hurled fireworks and rocks at federal officers in a violence-plagued night that saw illegal Venezuelan migrants shot in the leg after allegedly ambushing an agent with a shovel. It wasn't allegedly, he did. Photos show the vehicle covered in red spray paint in the middle of a debris-filled block, complete with messages like such as F ICE and the only good agent is a dead one. Trump is now threatening to declare and invoke the Insurrection Act. Something I encourage him to do. I truly do. Trump on Thursday threatened to invoke an 1807 law and deploy troops to quell persistent protests against federal officers sent to Minneapolis to enforce his administration's massive immigration crackdown. The threat comes a day after a man was shot and wounded by an immigration officer who had attacked with a shovel and a broom handle. That shooting further heightened fear and anger that radiated across the city since the Immigration and Customs Enforcement agent fatally shot Renee Good in the head. Trump has repeatedly threatened to invoke the Insurrection Act, a rarely used federal law. It was the Rarely used? Rarely used, huh? Say that in the 60s. Say that right after the Civil War. Okay? Where Grant stood up there and invoked it so that he could quell the KKK. Now the modern version of the KKK, okay, leftist Democrats still, are demanding it be called on them again by acting like the KKK. There is no difference between the actions of the KKK and what you're seeing in these violent protests, right, in Minneapolis with these people. There's literally no difference. With one exception. Oh, I'm here for immigration. Versus, I'm here to defend my rights against the blacks. That's the only difference. I'm going to sit there and act violently because you don't like immigrants. Well, I'm going to act violently because you're a black lover. Same tactics. I'm going to cover my face so you can't identify me. I'm going to use mob tactics. I'm going to get violent. Oh, I'm just throwing a water bottle that I froze, so I'm throwing chunks of ice at people. I'm throwing rocks. I'm shooting explosives at people. Trump should sit up there and declare an insurrection act against Minneapolis. Declare it. And as soon as Walz says, you can't do this, I will declare he's an insurrectionist too, and I would clamp him into jail. And I'm not joking around. These people know what they're doing. And if it's got to start, it's got to start. U.S. force seizes sixth oil tanker linked to Venezuela. The United States forces seized another Venezuela-linked oil tanker on Thursday morning following a fifth seizure last week, the U.S. Southern Command said on X. In another pre-dawn action, Marines and sailors from the Joint Task Force Southern Sphere, in support of the Department of Homeland Security, launched from the USS Gerald Ford and apprehended a motor tanker Veronica without incident. The only oil leaving Venezuela will be oil that is coordinated properly and lawfully, the command said, adding that the Trump administration will continue the crackdown on sanctioned vessels in the Caribbean. The crackdown has significant impact on Venezuela's oil exports, with its crude loadings falling to about half normal levels this month. Well, okay, first of all, what the hell's a normal level from Venezuela? Prior to Maduro and Chavez, the amount of oil flowing from Venezuela to what it was under Maduro, okay, it was always already less than a tenth of what it was pre-Chavez Maduro regime. And yes, you're not getting any money for the oil. And to add to this, you have this. The U.S. is pressing Mexico to allow U.S. forces to fight the cartels. Have you ever noticed just how many women are in these things? Maria Abby Habib, all right, Julian Barnes, Eric Schmidt, and Tyler Prager. The United States is intensifying pressure on Mexico to allow U.S. military forces to conduct joint operations to dismantle fentanyl labs inside the country, according to American officials. The push comes as President Trump presses on Mexican government to grant the United States a larger role in the battle against drug cartels that produce fentanyl and smuggle it into the United States. The proposal was first raised early last year, then largely dropped, officials said. But the request was renewed after the U.S. forces captured Maduro, all right, on January 3rd, and has involved highest levels of government, including the White House, according to multiple officials. U.S. officials want American forces, either Special Operations Forces or CIA officers. I wouldn't use CIA for anything. All right, to accompany Mexican soldiers on raids of suspected fentanyl facilities. They have no intention of doing that. The Mexican president can't do this. She is under the thumb of the Mexican drug cartels herself. It was easy to snatch Maduro, and quite frankly, it would be very easy to snatch Claudia Sheinbaum. But it wouldn't change anything in Mexico. Venezuela is a different story, but Mexico, it wouldn't change anything. Because Sheinbaum is nothing but a puppet. She does whatever the cartels tell her to do. She's not an independent actor. She has no independent agencies to do anything. But no, man, why is President Trump doing all this foreign policy stuff? Why isn't he concentrating on on things at home and in the United States? Because it's easier for a president to do that. I suggest anybody who asks that question, and anybody who demands that kind of a response or answer to any of this, I suggest you look up and read the Constitution of the United States. And what you will find is that the president's ability to affect domestic policy is limited and constrained by, well, first of all, the other powers within the federal government, aka the legislature, and secondly, the fact that he doesn't rule as a king, and you have states. And the power of the states to regulate its economy far exceeds anything that the federal government has. People have forgotten this because they've never studied it, and they've allowed this slow creep where they think, oh, the president could just wave his hand and all this stuff happens. No, it doesn't. That's why you end up with the frickin' problem in Minnesota right now, which is not just the immigration issue, but the massive fraud that's been going on. Now, Trump needs to clean house within the federal government. I'll be the first person to tell you that. He should be going through DHS right now and going, who here was lending out this money or approving this money to Minneapolis? And the first person who raises their hand, you say, you find it, you're out. You're finding another job immediately. And the reason for it is malfeasance and incompetence. You failed in your abilities for oversight. And I want anybody that was part of that group that approved the funding for the Minneapolis daycare, for the Somali daycare, every single one of them should be looking for new jobs because they were incompetent. They should be reducing the size of the federal forces and the Treasury Department as well, all right, that were approving these kind of grants and loans and all this shit. I have said this before. Even before this thing came out, back in the days, if people remember correctly, people were talking about the freaking Mississippi fraud case, which involved, what's his name? Brett Favre. Oh, look at Brett Favre. They need to put him in jail for what he did. He did some illegal shit. He was stealing from the poor and the welfare people. That money was for the welfare people, and he took it from them. Okay, if that's your attitude, what about the people who approved all this stuff for him? Shouldn't they be going to jail too? What about the federal officials who approved these grants and these loans, and this not even loans, they're just approved this federal distribution of money without any kind of reasonable oversight? And I mentioned it then. Why aren't these people on the hook? Why haven't you gone in and demanded they be fired for it? Notice I'm still consistent. The federal jackasses that were in charge of this shit need to be removed because they are, one, incompetent with other people's money. Demonstrably. Why are there no calls for this from the press? Why are there no calls for this, like you had to hang him high, Brett Favre, from ESPN? Oh, you had no problem going after Brett Favre, but the people who caused this, they're just let them go. And they're the same people who now are like crickets. Because, see, they don't care about the fraud. When they were bitching about Brett Favre, they were doing it not because they cared about the fact that there was massive fraud going on. They were only doing it because they looked at the skin color. They said, aha, we'll get Whitey this time. We'll get their great white hero, Brett Favre. As if somehow Brett Favre is being held up as a standard to American children. From Japan Wire, Japanese astronaut Yui and 3 others returned to Earth after ISS mission cut short. The Japanese astronaut Kimiyu Yui and 3 colleagues returned to Earth from the International Space Station on Thursday, about a month earlier than planned, after a medical issue cut short the mission, according to the U.S. Space Agency. The SpaceX spacecraft carrying the astronauts splashed down in waters off the coast of California, leaving the ISS. The 4 had spent about 5 months aboard the ISS conducting science experiments. According to NASA, one of the astronauts reported a medical concerns on January 7th prompting cancellation of the following day's scheduled activities outside the spacecraft. The person is in stable condition but requires a medical checkup on Earth, the agency said. No, I'm still waiting for them to tell us what the hell is going on. All right, the NASA administration did not identify the person for privacy reasons. Japan Aerospace Exploration Agency told Kyoto News that Yui 55 has no health issues. Yui wrote on social media ahead of the return to Earth that his work at the Japanese laboratory Kibo on the ISS had been the brightest moments of his life, adding, "Let's meet on Earth, the most beautiful in the vast outer space." It is the first time NASA has moved up a crew return for medical reasons in the 25-year history of the ISS, the organization said. The floor astronauts flew to the ISS from Florida in August. They were originally set to return in mid-February or later. Okay, NASA, let's see some real transparency here. Oh, but there's privacy concerns. There's medical privacy concerns. Yes and no. I would love to know what the hell this is about. I'm beginning to wonder what this was about. Seriously. There shouldn't be any privacy concerns but saying that a person has a cancer or something like that. These people aren't private anymore. They're public citizens. Just like if the president has cancer, I do expect them to relay that to the American people because the privacy concerns are outweighed by the national concerns, and that includes in this case. Okay? But I suspect it's something else. I truly suspect that this is something else. And it's not just about quote unquote medical privacy. I don't know. But nature abhors a vacuum. And when you have a vacuum of information, people start filling it in with their fantasies and their speculations. Just pointing this out. From the Daily Mail. Jenrick joins reform. The Tories and Labour have forfeited the right to govern. How John Jenrick planned to urge other Conservatives to follow him to reform before his Rumbledos rumbled. What the hell does that mean? I am curious what Rumbledos rumbled. What that means. All right. Robert Jenrick said that the Tories and Labour had both forfeited the right to govern the United Kingdom in a speech he planned on giving announcing his defection to reform. As the former immigration minister was unveiled by Nigel Farage in a haphazard press conference, the Conservative Party released what they said were extracts of notes Kimi Badenoch had passed, leading her to kick him out. In them, Jenrick praised Reform leader Nigel Farage and said that he was proud to become Reform's 281,000th member. The Newark MP, who was continually linked with the putsch against Ms. Badenoch after she pipped him to the leadership, said that putting party allegiance, personal ambition to one side, Farage was obviously the right person to lead change the UK needs. I'll be honest with you. I don't know who this person is, and I don't care. You guys have a serious problem, and this MP or that MP or this MP, that makes no difference. Okay? This prime minister, that prime minister, makes no difference. Not anymore. In my opinion, your real problem that you've got to fight, the problem that you've got to fix, okay? There's two areas that has to be fixed within the UK government, and it's the bureaucracy. And the only person who has the authority to go in there and start doing mass firings and removals is a lunatic, is a leftist, diehard mama's boy, King Charles. And he doesn't have the wherewithal to actually fix the country. Just putting it out there. This is just, granted, this is a Yanks viewpoint, okay? This is a Yanks viewpoint. Last few stories. 6 puppies treated for suspected fentanyl overdose in Washington will find new homes soon. So drug-addicted pups are now being going, here, don't worry, everything will be fine. Naloxone may have saved canines after firefighters sprayed it into their noses. There are a number of cases nationwide of suspected opioid exposure among dogs. 6 puppies in rural Washington state will soon be up for adoption after being revived after a suspected drug overdose. Some of them might go home with the fire station staff who saved them. 2 people dropped off 3 of the sickened puppies at the Sky Valley Fire about an hour's drive northeast of Seattle on Sunday. Officials believe the animals were either breathed or ate fentanyl. The firefighters sprayed an anti-overdose medication, Naloxone, up their noses and also treated them with oxygen and even performed CPR. It wasn't long before their tails started wagging, the battalion chief Brandon Vargas said Tuesday. Meanwhile, sheriff's deputies tracked down the people believed to have dropped off the dogs and found 3 more puppies that also needed treatment. An animal cruelty or neglect investigation is underway. The pair claimed they were caring for the puppies temporarily, authorities said. There have been a number of other cases nationally where pups have been saved after being exposed to fentanyl or other opioids. I'm happy that the dogs are saved. I'm not happy that the people who dropped the dogs off are running around free at the moment, because obviously these people are drugged within the drug community somehow and connected to it. Okay? They were obviously, although the drug just got sick. They were given these dogs to take care of, supposedly, and their way of taking care of the dogs was to drug them up. Just sad. Meanwhile, in the UK, man trains crows to attack MAGA hats after saying there's no longer a moral option. A man has gone viral after training a murder of crows to swoop down and snatch MAGA hats from unsuspecting Trump supporters, documenting his months-long experiment. If you fly with the crows, you might end up on the right side of history, especially if those clever birds are snatching MAGA hats for the greater good. Now, the person who wrote this, Andrea Oldenready, is an asshole. So it's okay if we have to train animals. Suppose we train, squirrels to attack labor MPs. Would that be okay? Would it be okay for them to sit up there and sniff out, this one smells like a labor person, let's attack them, right? The man has ruffled some feathers after having successfully trained crows to swoop down on unsuspecting MAGA hat wearers. Taking to his Threads page, Dave, who goes by the username BizDave, went viral after documenting all the steps and stages of his Corvid training stages, showing how to a handful of peanuts months of patience, and a dash of political mischief turned local crows into red hat removing legends. Now, first of all, I don't know how many MAGA people are running around in the UK. Okay? I really don't. But to be honest, this guy is an idiot. Now, I love this guy here. Oh, I tried to be a centrist. You were never a centrist. For a long time, I no longer believe that is a moral option. As a result, Dave has gripped the internet with his Trump hating crows. Personally, if I find you anywhere in the United States, I would put you under arrest. They don't talk about where Dave is from, right? Which is probably an attempt to try and keep this guy around. But I can tell you right now, if you're going to do this, first of all, in Britain, it's stupid because red is labor. Red is the leftist. Okay? But if you're training people to attack your political opponents, if you're training animals to attack your political opponents, personally, you should be under arrest. If you are in the United States, if Dave is in the United States at any point, if they track Dave down, he's going to jail. Because somebody disagrees with you politically, okay, doesn't give you the right to authorize attacks on them or their property. Now, a lot of people are like, oh, it's just this, it's just this, oh, it's just water, oh, it's just a sandwich. I'm hoping, in some ways, that Dave has found out and then he lives in Minneapolis because I would love to have the Marines kick in his door, right, and throw him into a paddy wagon. Because that's who these people, what they need. This guy, I'm trying to be a centrist. In order to be a centrist, in reality, you would have to have an open mind. David doesn't have an open mind. And he thinks his morality trumps everybody else. That's who he is. Now, I don't see a lot of people wearing MAGA hats anyway. You walk down the street, you walk into the different areas in the United States. Sure, there are a lot of Trump supporters, but they're not walking around with MAGA hats on because they don't need to. They got other lives. They got their real lives that they go with. The only time you'll see a MAGA hat wearer is if they're going to sit up there and counter protest some leftist loon area. That's the only time you'll ever see MAGA hats. They're a counterculture revolution. Final story of the day. Senegal's spear-wielding savanna chimps yield clues on humanity's past. The chimps are arming themselves. They're rising up in revolution, along with the Verret monkeys and the goats. They're now coordinating. We will show you. We will use tools. A shriek broke down on the savannah, followed by more screeches and the rustle of branches. The wild Fangoli chimps were bidding each other good morning in the dry, scraggy Sahel. Right? The rare chimpanzees who live in the bush of a hot southeast Senegal rather than the forest, as is more common, exist on an extreme edge of what is possible for their species. Their unusual ways of living offer clues to humans' own evolutionary past, while their adaptations to the heat appear timely in a world where temperatures are on the rise. Soaking in pools, cooling off in caves, and even wielding spears, the 35 wild chimps of the Fangoli community have adapted to the environment with behaviors that defies their species' conventional norms. So you're saying that we only started wielding spears because, well, it got too hot? This leads to another question, which is, well, if climate change is not, they're able to adapt to the climate change by picking up spears, what other animals will start picking up spears to deal with climate change? You never know. You never know. You never know when the crocs will sit up there and start holding out, little torpedoes in their mouths as they go sailing. Ah, folks. These are savanna chimps, right? They are a unique species evolution, right? They're part